Good
And
afternoon, Dr. Sim.
thank you for joining us this afternoon. Today's event is really special because there's so much new that's happening, based on what we've done over the last number of years. And we're pleased today to have Mr. Canary with us, who's written the book, The Coal Women of St. Thomas. And I'm going to see if I can hold it up so that people can see what the book looks like. This book is available at 340 Bookstore in Crown Bay, Pam Richards Bookstore. And if you go and you buy this within the next week or so and tell them that it's a part of this event, you will get the discount that she's offering on this book. So we thank Pam for giving us that discount as well. So Rico, and if I may call you Rico, I have several questions I want to ask you concerning this book. Your book pulls together, excuse me, a number of articles, newspaper articles, personal accounts, and other kinds of records about coaling and the coal women in St. Thomas. Why did you think it was necessary? Why did you feel it necessary to bring all this together in one book?
Well, the coaling industry in the Danish West Indies started as far back as 1841. And back then, all the newspapers and all the media was censored. So we never really had our voice per se. So up until recent times, to find the information, you have to go out and collect it yourself. And then through the work of people like Ms. Monifa and Nadine, it tends to come out piece by piece by piece. So because we didn't ever really have one formal piece of work presenting this material, I took it upon myself to say, this is a story that needs to be told. So I collected the information for those individuals that don't have access to the vast databases and the old textbooks and stuff that I have, to put it out there and make it readily and easily affordable for everybody to get this information.
Very good. And I mean, the book includes copies, images of many of the articles, newspaper articles, pictures. There are many, many pictures. And there are a couple of images that we have seen over the years, but your book includes some images of coal workers that we've never seen. And so I think that's really good. It gives us a really good image of what was going on. Now, in his book, The Brief History of the Virgin Islands, Jarvis describes the coal workers this way. He says, the women were frantic and they had sticks and other weapons brandishing about while they danced and marched ahead of the soldiers who had been sent to disperse them. With their skirts shortened, their heads wrapped in colorful Madras kerchiefs, and their flashing teeth in black and angry faces, they were not pleasant to look at. However, you provide a very different image of those women who were involved in the strike. You talk about them as wives and mothers and family people. Can you share some of your data with us in terms of who these people really were?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing so. And first, let me set the stage. The coaling industry in St. Thomas started, like I say, in the 1840s. Up until that time, you had all the vessels would have to travel using sail power. So it could take a month to travel from the United States to Europe. But with the introduction of steam and steam-powered engines, it could now be done in a number of days. And you're no longer at the mercy of the elements to make it happen. So just like today, we have hubs for airlines like in Miami and Dallas and Atlanta, St. Thomas was one of those hubs. And like Myron Jackson mentioned, in St. Thomas, the coal women pretty much kept the economy going during a period of time where, post-emancipation, but pre-tourism, there wasn't a lot going on. Now, these women, none of them owned any of their businesses. They were all employees. But to add more of a face or life to who these people were, because for the most part, all we ever see is these old black and white images of these, unicorn type people carrying huge baskets on their head with coal. But these were mothers and wives, and in some cases, children. We found records of some of the coal women, and I call them women as young as 14 years old. So the Ulla Muller dancers, yes, we look at them as though they were cute and adorable and stuff like that. But in reality, we may very well have seen some coal workers about that size and about that age, carrying these 80-pound baskets of coal on their head. There were also women as old as 76 years old. Now, keep in mind, this is during a period of time where the life expectancy of a Black woman was 49 years old. So if she's 76 years old, carrying an 85-pound basket of coal on her head, she probably should have been dead 25 years ago, and she's still working to support her family. The average age of the coal women was about 36 years old. So these are women that were in their prime childbearing ages. So I can only imagine how many miscarriages must have happened from carrying these loads of coal back and forth over and over and over. And not only that, about 50-something% of the women were married, about 60% of them were literate, and not just literate, able to read and write. In the harbor of St. Thomas, it was very bilingual in that you had to be able to speak English, Spanish, Dutch Creole, where Dr. Gilbert's going to talk a little bit about that. Some German, some French, some Danish. So incredible women. To imagine the fact that, you went to work, carried 100 or 200 baskets of coal to earn $2, and then covered in soot at the end of a long day, you went home to be a mom, to breastfeed your children, to lie next to your husband and make dinner and comfort him. These are women that their story definitely should be told. It's an incredible story. And I hope that, with our Dollar for Dollar program, with my book, it's a little part of stimulating people to want to know more about these people and learn more about them.
Well, your book sheds some light on various aspects of the industry that many people might not know. And one of the things that fascinated me as I read your book is the fact that some of the white sailors had to, on occasion, coal the ships because either there was a holiday or the workers were on strike. And there's a picture on page 79 of two sailors with the baskets on their head, but they don't look as stressed as the women in another picture, a similar image of the women carrying the baskets. Can you talk to us a little bit about what brought about the sailors having to coal the ships from time to time?
Yeah, that's a rather rare occurrence, but whenever there would be labor interruption in the form of a strike, or maybe there were 2 or 3 ships in that needed to be coaled at the same time, or they were just in a hurry and had to just stop and get going, then everybody had to pitch in to get it done. And some of the images that we were lucky to be able to rescue from hurricanes and fire and other kind of disasters does show one of those rare occurrences where some people did, other than Black women, did do some coaling. So it was probably 80% Black women that did the coaling. There were a number of Black men. The men tended to do more of the work as far as the shoveling and loading the baskets for the women, or working inside the hull of the ship as trimmers, where they would even out the coal once it would pour into the basket. And like I said, only during a holiday, inclement weather, a heavy load of ships that need to be there, would you ever have anyone other than Black women in St. Thomas doing the actual coaling.
Thanks for sharing that. And you mentioned the people shoveling and trimming and doing other things like that. Now we know that the women were paid, a penny a basket, and they were really trying to get more pay. But what I also understand now is that they didn't get to keep their penny a basket because they had to pay some of the other people who were involved in the industry. Can you share with us what percentages and how they had to share that little bit of money that they actually earned?
Yes, the trimmers are the ones that probably earn the most money. They probably earn like 3 cents, for whatever period of time, or depending on how much coal needed to be loaded in the ship, would determine how much they would get paid. But the coal women, and keep in mind, their pay was like a penny per basket, and there was no annual pay raise. This is what their pay was for probably 30 years straight. And yes, to go back and forth and to make as many trips as they could to the ship and back to the mounds of coal, they had the gentleman that would be shoveling and filling the baskets for them. And of that penny, and like I said, they went probably 30 years without ever getting a raise, they had to share half of it with the shovelers. And even when they went to strike for more pay, they were basically asking for 3 cents a basket, and they ended up getting 1.5 cents. And that's all the way back in 1915 when they got that. In 1890, the strike in 1890s, their pay didn't go up. They just got the dollar value for what they worked for versus an actual increase. So from the 1890s till like 1916, there was no pay raise. It was still 1 penny per basket, which they had to share.
Right, and of course they had no health benefits or anything. There were certain dangers involved in coaling the ship, especially if they worked at night. So I know I read in your book that there were people who fell off the planks and somebody got covered up in the hole covered with coal and died. Can you share with us some of the other kinds of casualties that occurred in this industry?
Yes, there were numerous hazards involved in working just in the coal industry, the first of which being black lung disease. You're working in these mounds of coal, and approximately 15% of the workers did indeed get black lung disease. We have no idea how much black lung disease the trimmers who actually inside the ship must have had, but it must have been worse because every time they threw a basket of coal in, the dust would just go into the air. And if you can imagine, these small particles would get into their lungs and just basically shred their lungs apart over time. So that's just one hazard. Another one is they would suffer from something called coal tattooing or stripes, where as you're carrying and lifting all these different lumps of coal, over time, you're going to get different little nicks and cuts and scratches and stuff. And what happens is the coal dust gets into them. And even after you take a bath or a shower, whatever, it comes off, but it leaves that tattoo under the skin because the skin heals over it. And you could definitely tell who all were coal women long after, they had stopped working just because of all the stripes. Now, in addition to that, like I say, sometimes the coaling would happen in the daytime, sometimes it would happen at nighttime. And actually the coal token, similar to the one I have here, some of them would have a little nick in them, a little triangle cut out to indicate that that person worked at nighttime. So they earned maybe a penny and a half instead of a penny for working under the more hazardous conditions. Now, most of the coaling took place on Hassel Island. So in the daytime, it was dangerous, but at nighttime, you had to get on a boat, a lot of time was overloaded, and travel across the water over to Hassel Island. Now, in calm seas, it's dangerous. In rough weather, it was very common for these boats to capsize. And if you weren't a strong swimmer, it wasn't uncommon for people to be lost and died. And not only that, just going up and down the planks. There's a lot of stories about the music that would be playing or the singing that they would be doing. And a big part of that was to keep pace so that as people are going up the ramp and people are coming down the ramp, they're not going at different speeds, because if anyone were to collide, it would knock several people over. And I do actually have one picture in the book where it shows one such an accident. It's a drawing of people colliding and falling over, but it wasn't unusual. It wasn't unusual at all for people to fall off the gangplank or the boats to capsize, and they would just find your bodies the next morning if the sharks hadn't gotten you. And then, of course, later on, then they with the institution of bigger cranes, well, the wharf owners were glad to have the cranes because they could lift more coal and move more coal around. But the dangers with that is now you have people working in very close proximity to high-powered equipment. And whenever a crane accidentally tipped or coal fell from it, it fell down on the people, injuring, if not killing them. A lot of times the coal machines, the cranes would break wires and the wires would come down and injure people. So it wasn't common for the women. Sometimes they believe they might even sometimes have sabotaged some of the cranes because they were so afraid of them. And they were just dangerous. It's, you're working next to heavy equipment and it's late at night or, it's raining, whatever the hazardous conditions are, that ship needed to be coaled. And these were the women that stood up and said, I'm willing to do it for $1.
Right. One of the older poets, Jose Jimenez, wrote a poem called Cranes Mean Nothing to the Coal Passer. So, he was talking about that very same thing, about the dangers of the crane and how the coal workers view the crane. And I know our time is wrapping up and I don't want them to tell me we have to stop. But before we end, Mr. Cornero, I'd like to ask you, what did you learn in the process of putting this book together?
I learned that a hero doesn't necessarily have a red, white, and blue suit on with a big S on his chest. The coal women for the most part, were also the fire brigade. There was a period of time when the island of St. Thomas was very susceptible to fires. And what would happen is when a fire broke out, it would take out 1,000 houses. But because of the hard work of the coal women and stuff like that, as soon as a fire was detected, they who already knew how to make a chain gang would instantly grab buckets and start going back and forth and put out the fire before it ravaged the island. So the biggest thing I learned is that, like I say, heroes aren't necessarily what Hollywood teaches us they're supposed to look like.
Well, I really want to thank you for what you've done for writing this book. And Mr. Carneiro has several other books as well, including one that deals with slave ads, runaway ads, and so forth. But he's done a lot of writing and a lot of research, and I would encourage everyone to get a hold of the Coal Women of St. Thomas. It really helps to shed a lot of light on the work, on the industry, and the people who are involved in it. So Rico, I want to thank you very much for sharing with us today, and I hope that you will stay with us and enjoy the rest of this presentation, because we might have some questions for you later on when they